Okay, I'm going to talk about dopamine and serotonin. So, when we think about these, they're neurotransmitters, right? And we associate them with feelings of happiness, or they're feel good chemicals, right? So, when we think of dopamine, though, or rather the research on dopamine, it's the instant reward neurotransmitter, right? So, the moment we take a bite of sugary or a fatty food, our brain secretes dopamine. Okay, it makes us feel good, and uh, it's just also associated with other instant reward things, like systems, like when we use drugs. Okay, whether it's marijuana, alcohol, whatever drug you may use, or gambling, we get this dopamine rush. Okay, and it is a rush. That's the point here. It doesn't last that long, and that's why if you've ever been depressed and you're treating that depression with I don't know, marijuana or alcohol, you have to use that drug constantly. You have to keep using it to get the happiness effects out of it, right? So now let's talk about serotonin. So serotonin is, again, it's similar in that it gives you that happiness feeling, right? But the difference is that serotonin regulates overall mood, okay? Mood, behavior, and even sleep, okay? It's associated with a long-term feeling of well-being. And if we take this and compare it to dopamine, the thing is if you have a long-term feeling of well-being, if you are regulating your overall mood well, which is what serotonin does, then you're going to get the effects of dopamine from serotonin, the short-term effects, right? You're not going to be so dependent on on dopamine if you are producing serotonin the way that you could. So again, dopamine is associated with rewards, instant rewards, motivation, and these dopamine rushes that we often associate with drug use, right? But if we look at serotonin, a long-term feeling of well-being and mood regulation will give you all of those things in addition to, again, the long term, in addition to the lack of dependence on the drugs. So what do I mean lack of dependence on the drugs? Well, 95% of the serotonin in your body is produced in the gut, okay, in your intestines. So what that means is that serotonin it's created by your diet. It's created by what you eat. And if you are creating optimal levels of it, you're not going to be so dependent on dopamine. And I can kind of attest to this personally. And again, that's not scientific evidence. It's an anecdote, but it seems to me that dopamine is kind of the evolutionary backup for happiness and motivation when the environment is less than ideal, and in effect when your diet is less than ideal. Whereas serotonin kind of serves as the foundational manner in which your body it gets its motivation and happiness. So as we become more dependent on dopamine boosts to remain happy, we are very likely have some kind of serotonin deficiency. So let's talk about how we improve our or how we get more serotonin in our body, how we improve our serotonin production. Well, again, it's created in the gut, okay, in your intestines. So there's a lot of new research around the gut microbiome, and it's basically the research is pointing to this idea that a diversity of whole foods nourishes your gut microbiome. And when we remove that diversity, what happens is the number of different bacteria in your gut will diminish. Okay, you won't need, if you're not eating a lot of different types of foods, you don't need as many different types of bacteria to digest those foods. So what this can cause is it can cause the overgrowth of certain bacteria, and this is very bad for your gut. Okay, this is theorized to be how we get like leaky gut and things like that. So when we have a diversity of whole foods, our body our gut ends up creating more serotonin. And what happens is we reestablish the serotonin connection between our gut and our brain. And what that does is it makes us less dependent on drugs and alcohol. And there's studies that have shown that if you eat 30 different whole foods a week, and that can be just spread out over the whole week, doesn't have to be every day, you are going to more or less maximize this health of the gut microbiome. And what that's going to do is it's going to improve your serotonin production. And what I was going to say is I can attest to this personally. I changed my diet. I started eating. I mean, I might eat 25 whole foods every day, and maybe I cycle in the other 5 or so throughout the week. And I've my depression disappeared. I never got a whole lot of anxiety, but the depression disappeared when I started eating healthy in conjunction with exercise. And this if we think about this, if we go back to when we were first developed in the womb, we all of our we began as this connection to our mothers in the womb through the umbilical cord, and the umbilical cord is attached straight to your belly button, to your gut, right? So we're created through this gut microbiome. That's how our body developed in the first place. And then what happens is as we develop in the womb and we're born, what happens is the purpose of the umbilical cord becomes the purpose of the mouth, okay, the food that goes into your mouth, and now that, and through your esophagus, and it creates your gut microbiome. So you're no longer dependent on the nutrients your mother's eating, and you're dependent on the stuff you put in your mouth. So it makes sense that this concept that we are what we eat really is true. And the important thing to recognize here is that we're seeing these rising rates of depression, anxiety, and drug use, all this stuff, and just even violent behavior. We're bottom line, we're not behaving in a manner conducive to longevity. And what's changed the most in the last 30 years, it correlated with these negative behaviors, again, these diseases of disparity, this obesity, depression, anxiety, even violence. We changed our diets drastically, and we've been eating these more and more processed foods, and we're getting more and more sick because of it. It makes perfect sense, okay? The food is very likely the large source of many of the problems we're seeing in society today. So if you find yourself dependent on alcohol or other drugs to remain happy and sane in this insane world, increasingly insane world, then I beg you, get your diet in order, because and it's not, you can't do this in 2 weeks, okay? In order to refoster a healthy gut microbiome, it's going to take 6 months or more. Fiber is also an important thing to mention here. Fiber, it creates even more diversity of bacteria in your gut. And again, the diversity is the key here. If you're dependent on drugs to stay happy and sane, I implore you to start eating healthier, because it really will change your world. I promise you, it will change the entire outlook you have. And what it does is that'll enable you to stop looking at the world in perhaps a negative way, and you'll become encouraged to help other people do the same. And that's the journey I'm on right now. It's I never, even 6 months ago, I would never thought that I would have been making a video like this, never. But it's from all my own personal experience, I know the power of a healthy diet. So eat more fiber, eat more plant-based whole foods, and stick with it, okay? Exercise, cut out the processed foods, especially the processed carbs and the processed meat, okay? Try to limit the fat salt combinations and fat sugar combinations in your diet, and your brain will become less those combinations create these dopamine rushes, and if you cut them out in conjunction with those a diversity of whole foods, you're going to feel better and you're going to become less dependent on drugs to remain sane. And I cannot say this enough. It's just I really encourage you to do this. Okay, try to eat organic foods if you can, but if you can't afford it, rinse off the fruits and the veggies as well as you can. I don't eat all organic foods, but I do probably about maybe a third of the whole plant-based foods I eat are organic. It's not most of them. Just again, the point of the organic food is that when we use glyphosate the in our food production, what happens is it destroys the soil food web of life, and the ultimate result of that is there's less micronutrients in the foods that we eat. So you have to eat more of those foods to get the necessary micronutrients that will both help your gut thrive and your brain and your body in general. So give that a little thought, okay? I really encourage you to improve your diet if you don't feel well. It will be the most beneficial thing you can do. Try not to eat out as much because, again, the food you eat out, eat in restaurants, it's designed to taste good at no at the expense of health. Okay, we know this. Now, obviously, there's some good places you can eat out at, but you're gonna pay up for healthy food in restaurants, and produce is cheap. If you're gonna make excuses and say that it's expensive to eat healthy, it's not true. I eat 3,200 calories a day, and it's $11 a day. I eat probably more than most people, but I'm a little more active probably than most people, and I mean $11 a day. If you're eating for less than $11 a day at 3,200 calories, I would be surprised. And if you are, leave a comment. Tell me what you're doing. And if you have a garden, that doesn't count. You're cheating. So just give that a little thought. Thanks for watching.